welcome to Fire at Will. I am delighted to be joined by a man who is known by his enemies and admirers alike as the People's Ganon, Paul Cox. Paul, welcome.
Thanks, Will. I am now, aren't I? Much thanks to you, actually, for perpetuating the great myth that is the People's Gammon.
I just think it's a wonderful brand.
I've had mixed reviews. So not from, when I say mixed reviews, obviously there are plenty of people out there who don't like it, but from people in media that say, some people say, absolutely stick with it. This is your brand. We want to see more of Sir Oinks-a-Lot, which was a fictional character I made up as kind of a sidekick. Other people say, oh, no, they're not. People aren't going to take you seriously. To which I usually say I didn't realise anyone ever was going to. But apparently there are people out there who start taking me seriously now, Will.
Well, that's an interesting thought because you've got a very unusual profile. As in that, in fact, there's possibly no one in the country who can say they've had a corporate career of note. They are a comedian. They've also worked as a administrator in comedy, as a promoter, and now as a political commentator. You straddle the funny side of the world as well as the serious side. How do you reflect on where you are positioned in the political commentary landscape?
So I've never actually curated that. So I've never set out, sort of 4 or 5 years I've been in media, I never went, right, this is going to be my brand, this is what I need to do. I was given the opportunity first to work in media at GB News. Interestingly, I was always so excited by the prospect of GB News, particularly on the back of Trump in 2016 and then COVID throughout those years. And GB News was always in the wings waiting to start. It started in 21 and I joined in 22. Had no idea that I'd ever get anywhere near media work, least of all the fact that I would get onto GB News. But Leo Kearse was working on a show called Headliners at the time, which was a GB News show that ran from 2021 through to 2025, and essentially comedians reviewing the newspapers. But I love my politics, and I love working on that show, and sort of grew into that. And then that show, because of its success, presented a problem both to the channel and to the people working on it. Is what are we? Are we comedians or are we political commentators? And I always thought, well, I'm not anyone could be a commentator, but I'm not a journalist. If I'm a politico, it's only in my own head because that's something I've always enjoyed doing. But I thought what I did notice is it helped, the humour side of it helped me deal with the stress of all the stories, and it also became a very useful tool for disarming. So if you get involved in debates, whether it's right on right or right on left or whatever it might be, sometimes you can really keep people on side by disarming, or you can keep the audience on side by disarming through humour.
It's something which someone like Donald Trump instinctively understands is the power of comedy. Something that someone like Keir Starmer just never understood. I think it's something, to be honest, the way that the left has evolved over the last 20 years, there is an earnestness, there is a joylessness.
Yes.
The right used to be the stuck-up, uptight, boring, conservative ones.
It is.
And something has happened in the last 20 years whereby that has inverted. What do you think that comes down to in terms of that, I guess, and I'm not saying for a second that every right-wing commentator is funny or looks on the positive side of life. That's certainly not the case. But there is a philosophical difference in the way that they approach subjects, particularly around that, I think, an optimism and a sense of humour.
Yeah, I think a sense of humour comes from a sense of understanding yourself. And I think the left capitulate their whole self-sovereignty to a greater power, which is usually the government or the leader or whatever it is. I've always found that with the left. They always say it's, this is the greater cause. We're doing things for the greater good. We are the good. You can't be the good and defer everything to the greater good if you want to take the mickey out of it. You have to be able to stand alone and view it independently. Now, just so happens that I now, by today's measure, have right-wing views. I didn't have right-wing views in the mid-90s. I didn't have right-wing views in the mid-2000s. And I probably became part of the right in the mid-2010s, just as a result of staying in exactly the same position politically, but of course the Overton window moving. And I think there is a lot to be said about being irreverent, and you can't be irreverent on the left anymore. For whatever reason, they hold themselves in such high regard and the greater power in such high regard that they can't see themselves as anything other than part of the flock. I don't see myself necessarily as part of the right-wing flock, in the same way as I don't see you and I as exactly the same, even though we share a lot of the same views. Whereas you often see this identitarianism on the left, where people are they coalesce around an idea, a person. We've seen it. Corbyn, for instance, I never understood Jeremy Corbyn, but people coalesced around him like he was a deity. It made no sense to me whatsoever. I've never coalesced around Farage. I've never coalesced around Boris Johnson. I've admired them both differently at different times, and I admire people that stand up for things. So that's not to say I could never admire anyone on the left, but the independent thinking is what I'm attracted to more than anything else. Now, I'm sure if you're watching this from the left, I'd be very surprised if you are. But if you are, you're probably thinking, well, we're all independent of thought, and you on the right of the clan. Well, we're simply not. We're not one blob. In fact, if you look at our politics, it's quite split. And this is the one advantage the left have over us, is that they are able to coalesce, and we're not at the moment. We could do. We're so close, but we've created different leaders.
Well, why don't we start there then? The right. We're in an interesting point in British political history. There is fragmentation of what was once a 2 to 2.5 party system.
Yep.
It's become a 5 to 5.5 party system. In the electoral structure that we currently have, that will lead to bizarre outcomes. And very possibly, and very worryingly, if the left coalesces together, votes tactically, you could very easily see a Frankenstein coalition of the Lib Dems and Labour, or the Lib Dems, the Greens and Labour with the SNP in Scotland, coming together to defeat a Reform Party potentially that may have a bigger vote share, but it won't be able to get the necessary number of seats. How do you feel about that challenge that the right is facing at the moment?
Well, I'm worried. I'm genuinely concerned by the fact of that possibility, and it's a very strong possibility. You know, I was talking to someone who used to be a Lib Dem councillor this morning, who is more than happy for that coalition to exist. Lib Dems, Green, Labour. Now, I don't know what he's thinking really in terms of the greater good, but the Lib Dems have got very little to do with the Greens, for instance, and they haven't got that much to do with Labour. But what they are able to do is come together because they would much rather be in a very dysfunctional family that could ruin the country than allow the right to succeed in any way, shape or form. Because I think part of that is fear for them also, but their ideologies would fall apart very quickly. If, say, Reform get in government and they're able to solve some of the big tent pole items like immigration and welfare, that we've been told for 30 years, 40 years, they're impossible to solve, and we're actually on the right path. If someone comes in and does something differently and solves those issues, their whole ideology is going to crumble overnight, and they're going to become this very sort of disparate soup.
Mm-hmm. There's only one party that I have contempt for in this country, and it's the Lib Dems. Now, the Greens are dangerous and deluded. Labour are, I think, increasingly pointless in an age where they no longer represent the working class, but also they don't now represent the liberal urban elite in the way they once did. Increasingly, the far left is taking that ground. Again, similar thing with the Conservatives. I think increasingly they just don't have a lane. And you can see Reform trying to take down that centre-right position and restore with a more further right position. They all have a purpose there. The Lib Dems, I don't think, have any real beliefs. And I think it is the politics of keeping your head in the sand in the knowledge that your little spot of leafy England is still going to be fine for the foreseeable future. So you can have these luxury beliefs as the rest of the country suffers. And for me, that represents a political cowardice that I can't tolerate. I really, really struggle with them.
Yeah, there's very little conviction in the Lib Dem party. I say this as someone who's got a good friend who is a Lib Dem MP, and she does a fantastic job for her local constituents. But
I started dating a girl who, at least until I started dating her, was voting for the Lib Dems. Don't worry, I very, very quickly sorted that out. On current trajectory, the girl will be patrolling the English Channel in a few months. So we're heading in the right direction. But and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it is interesting in that I think she represented a lot of people who vote for that type of party, in that the vibes are, well, let's all just be kind to each other. You know, isn't Donald Trump nasty? Isn't Nigel Farage a fascist? And, you know, isn't it all just so nice to go and sit in the pub on the Sundays and forget about our worries?
Yes.
Without actually knowing about, well, there has to be a so what there, given that the country is facing really serious challenges and requires serious people to fix them.
Well, that's the point. That's the point. So the politics of luxury, which is pretty much occupied by the Liberal Democrats, it has no place in modern Britain, because modern Britain is no form of luxury whatsoever. No form of luck is interesting. You know, walking here this afternoon, you look around, we're in a touristy part of London, and you can see people are flocking to this country, taking photographs of landmarks, but they have no idea. They have absolutely no idea that they have visited a Britain that is absolutely nothing like they've been told in the books and in the history books and on the internet. We're a mere shadow of ourselves, and luckily there are a number of people who understand that. The Lib Dems don't understand that and just play this, they play along the lines and they say, well, let's not rock the boat too much. And actually, we want to be seen as kind, which is what Labour and the Greens, I mean, there is no unkinder party than the Greens. The Greens are insidious. The Greens are sinister. The Greens are potentially dangerous in a way that you can't really say about any other party. Some people might say that about Restore, because there are some very far right views in the corners of the Restore Party, but on the whole, I think that the Green Party itself is incredibly, just like I say, sinister. I don't know, and to align yourselves with that as the sort of centrist liberal Democrat, to me, says you have no ideology, you have no conviction, and you certainly have no idea how we're going to solve the problems of this country.
Well, there's the other thing as well, in that there's one thing being sinister and malicious. And if you want to make that argument about Restore, some people will make that argument. But I don't think they're particularly trying to gaslight people into, saying that they're something that they're not. Whereas the Greens will continuously tell you that they're the kind ones, they're the compassionate ones. And yet through their actions, in response to the death of any prominent person on the right, from Charlie Kirk through to Anne Widdecombe, you will see that these people fundamentally apply their kindness and their compassion incredibly selectively. And if you fall outside the ambit of what they consider to be, the right type of person with the right type of beliefs, then you're right. They are absolutely and totally vicious in the way that they will attack people. And again, I can't tolerate that when you're going to gaslight us into trying to tell us that you're the good guys.
No, and they are definitely the people that have said about they've got this manifesto of manipulation. I saw some footage just yesterday from Boomtown, which is like a dance festival in the middle of the South Downs, not too far from where I live in Hampshire. Big festival. Zach Polanski's there. The Scissor Sisters are just about to come on, which is they're an Australian band, actually.
Don't know, this
an American band.
I don't feel like death.
Yeah, that's not why people tune into this.
No.
But and I'm thinking to myself, Zach Polanski's there. He's talking about billionaires. He's talking about landlords. And I'm thinking to myself, these are very impressionable 20-year-olds. And we're not seeing that from any other party. I know that's what you have to do. But I think about politics as winning hearts and minds. And you do that through policy and you do that through debate. You don't do that through manipulation by telling people that everybody's bad. People with money are bad. Now, obviously, you can equate that the other way around to people like you and I going, illegal immigration is bad, etc. But the billionaires are generating good things. They're generating wealth. They're not really taking anything away from you. They haven't taken wealth that was yours. They've gone and earned that wealth. It's not true the other way around. There is a number of crimes disproportionately committed by illegal immigration seekers in this country. And so I would always say straight away, that's not the same argument. But the Greens are manipulating the youth into believing that absolutely everybody else is terrible, including their own people, their incumbent culture. And the thing about that that's so dangerous is we've seen it since I was a child, and I'm in my mid-40s now, where we've essentially taken what was one of the greatest achievements in global history, which was the British Empire, turned it into something completely evil and turned its own young people against its past, which means that they've grown up thinking anything that Great Britain has achieved is bad when it's simply not true.
At the same time, this type of politics, left-wing populism, is becoming increasingly popular, not just in the United Kingdom, but across the Anglosphere. You're seeing the rise of the Democratic Socialists of America at the moment, represented through people like Mamdani and AOC and El Sayed, the new nominee for, forgotten the state, but the Senate nominee for the Democrats, for Wisconsin. why, when we know through thousands of years of history that these economic policies will not work, are not capable of working, why do you think that these types of voices are increasingly getting traction both in this country and further afield?
Because it sounds so delicious, doesn't it? When you say we're going to give you free rent, free transport, free money, you haven't got to do anything for it. In fact, because the dastardly billionaires have taken it all away, if we take it back off of them, we just give it all to you and you can do what you like with it. They think that's actually a worthwhile and workable policy. It's simply not. If you look at the things that are doing well in the world in terms of financial markets and economies, just look at, I don't know, televisions or technology or whatever. That's a free market. People are going out there and buying and choosing to do that. The things that are failing are like the energy markets. We've got no free will at all. You're just told that's what you've got to have. The biggest problem we've got in this country probably isn't illegal immigration. It's the size of the state is enormous and very ineffective. So not only have we got a massive bureaucracy, but they're also incapable of delivering anything. And they're presiding over some of the biggest problems that we've got in this country. The trick that the left-wing progressives and populists have been able to do is convince people that irrespective of what you can see, right now, irrespective of what Marxism taught us, what Russia taught us, what China's taught us, what Venezuela's taught us, Cuba, any of these things, any of these examples, well, they've taught us it's okay and next time it will be better. It's just, I mean, it's hats off to them. It's incredible that they've managed to do that. And I wish that we could find an argument or be as persuasive as they are, because right-wing populism exists. Arguably, you and I are part of that sphere, but I don't see it as populism. I see it as something just desperately clinging on to common sense. I see all of this as common sense. The free market works. Capitalism works. Socialism has failed, continually failed, and not just failed, it's killing people.
This is the problem when you have an increasingly mediocre class of leaders that are now representing us. And that is that the threat of left-wing populism obviously isn't a new phenomenon. The Cold War was fought on these grounds, right? But I think you had substantial figures in the 20th century who were able to make the case for free markets, to make the case for freedom of speech, to make the case for sensible centre-right conservative politics. The concern that I have on both the left and the right is that we now are led by a class of people who are fundamentally unable to make a case and to persuade people. Now, it is difficult to persuade people that we need a smaller benefits bill because inevitably you're going to be taking money away from some people. It is difficult to make the case for lower taxes, at least in the short term, counterintuitively, because that's going to mean that you're going to have to drop spending. And again, there's going to be losers out of that. As a result of that, again, under Blair, under the Conservatives, under this Labor government, you consistently see politicians of both the left and the right shirk hard choices because they can't be bothered or they're incapable of going out day after day and actually making a case for difficult but important reforms. How do you change that?
Well, as I said this morning, I was talking to a Lib Dem councillor, ex-Lib Dem councillor, and he said he's willing to coalesce and collaborate with people he fundamentally disagrees with. And that's powerful because they are coming together and saying for the greater good. What we fail to do on the right is say that actually there's massive common ground between Kemi, Rupert and Nigel. Yep. Massive common ground. We're talking like 80%.
80 to 85%. Yeah.
Incredible amounts of common ground, more than they've got on the left.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it seems to be, unfortunately, a game of egos. So who can win? The Conservative Party under Kemi said, well, we're the right. We're the British right. We're the Conservatives. We've been here 100 plus years. Okay, we had those 14 years, but it's different now under Kemi. And then they just won't accept Nigel or Rupert. But weirdly, they've got Rupert in cahoots on certain things. And then Nigel has built a campaign purely on destroying the Conservatives. So he is saying we're going to get rid of those entirely, when really, actually, he needs to take a lot of them with him. So if you've been supporting a team for 100 years and someone comes along actually is more supportive of that team, but said the team you've been supporting is gone and dead and I want to kill it, then you are going to put some people off. And then you get Rupert come along who doesn't fit in, although he is really part of the establishment, almost more than Nigel Farage and Kemi is, but he's got this band of followers that he doesn't seem to be in tune with. So we've got, I don't, and by the way, this is not a dig at Restore, because I understand why Restore exists, because what they're saying is more, what they believe is more of the same from Nigel. And what they want to see is massive step change. Unfortunately, there are some things that are very uncomfortable for most British people, no matter how conservative they are. And that's, you know, differentiating people based on skin colour, for instance.
Yeah. To be honest, I think it is just that. Like, I think the problem for Restore is that, and again, this is because I think there is a lot of relatively young people who are in senior positions in that party who, quite frankly, don't have the experience both in life and in politics to just temper their ideological purity in order to have, you know, kind of to give people the permission to go along with their ideas. Because if you actually look at a lot of their policies on economics, I agree with most of them. You know, I was reading the other day, really sensible ideas around making private school fees tax deductible. Really sensible ideas around making private healthcare tax deductible. These are all policies that you can see in Australia, or variations thereof. And Australia has a much better balance of public and private services than this country does, which I think is far too far to the socialised end of the spectrum. Similarly, you look at things like the death penalty, which they are believers in at least having a referendum on. It's one of those ones which, you know, the liberal elite would go, oh, we're a civilised society, we've moved past that. But that has majority support in this country. You look at, again, I would say some of the spiciest stuff, you know, banning halal and kosher slaughter. A lot of people would agree with that. A lot of people would agree with banning the burqa. A lot of people would agree, I would suggest maybe most now, with the need for mass deportations, where you draw that line is an open question. So a lot of the ingredients in their policy mix, I would add as well, and again, I know the GB News audience doesn't support this, by and large, but at least having the courage to say the triple lock is unsustainable and we need to think of a different way to sort out social care and pensions in this country. Again, I think if you look at the long-term economic forecasts, I don't think they're wrong. These are all, I think, sensible, principled decisions, but they get tangled up by media, by people in the media who go, I can get this bloke by asking whether or not King Charles is a white British man. And that's all you hear about, and that's all that they are associated with. And again, that is just, it is a failure of politics a lot of the time that these guys are suffering from.
Yeah, very interesting. There isn't anything there that I didn't agree with, apart from one thing. I need to distance myself from any criticism of pensioners. My harem is 98% WASPy women. And
a quick detail, some people won't be aware. What are WASPy women?
Oh my God, you didn't get me on.
Women Against State Pension Inequality. So, ladies and gentlemen, Women Against State Pension Inequality is a voluntary UK-based organisation founded in 2015 that campaigns against the way in which the state pension ages for men and women were equalised. Previously, and some people who are a bit younger may not know this, women received a pension 5 years earlier than men, and in one of the more unfortunate parts of the push for gender equality, that was equalised, so the pension age for women went up to be the same as men. Now, this is your demographic.
These are my demographic. These are the very intelligent women that find me attractive. And this is what's happened. You know, you've got to go with your clan. Yeah. Well, in all seriousness, now, what happens to some of those women is that they were literally weeks away from getting their pension and planned everything around it, left full-time jobs, careers, etc., made plans for the future based on getting their state pension. And then, well, in some cases, were forced to wait 6 years for that, which meant they had to go back to work. They had to put their plans on hold. That seemed incredibly unfair. And I agree with that, which is why I distance myself from any comments around pensioners. But however, the triple lock is something that is going to have to be discussed. I mean, I'm hoping the triple lock is around when you and I retire, but the chances of it being are very slim.
That's the thing. Everyone knows it won't be. In fact, most people my age, I'm 35, most people have conceded, I don't think there will be a pension there at all when we are, you know, reaching retirement. You just look at the aging population with the fact the economy is buggered in this country. Not just short-term going through a rough trot, structurally buggered in this country. And I can't see that everyone knows the triple lock won't be there. Whether there is even a pension system at all I think is highly unlikely.
So the most contentious thing often amongst the GB News family and audience is the conflation between benefits and pension, because the welfare bill includes pensions. But obviously, a lot of our audience are an age where they're drawing pensions, and they rightly point out that I paid into that thing for 50 years. I'm entitled to take some out. And that's fine. And I agree. We probably should separate that as part of the debate. It can stay there as part of part of the budgetary concern. But in terms of what you were saying with regards to Australia and the UK and the division between state-funded services and private-funded services, why wouldn't you make it tax beneficial to go private? Yes, we should have a welfare system. Yes, it's great to have an NHS, but we're funding everybody, including the third world at the moment. Yeah. So if there is an incentive for those that could afford to get a tax deduction in order to go privately to schools or whatever, why not allow them? Also, what's wrong with aspiration? We killed aspiration under this Labour Party once again. I know a friend of mine runs a small plumbing business. He puts all his money in putting his children, his young girls, through private education, which has now cost him an extra 20% more and almost made it unachievable at a point where they've both been in it for 5 years.
Now, by all accounts, that VAT change has not raised any revenue for this government. If anything, it's actually cost money as a result of the administrative changes associated with it.
Well, it was a spiteful policy. Yeah. It was the politics of envy. We know it was. I didn't go to private school, but let me tell you something. If you didn't go to private school, you definitely have got a greater chance of getting a benefit from going to private school than you do a classic comprehensive like I went to. Just the networking alone, the people you get to meet, who they're related to. Now, people I know on the left have a fundamental issue with that because they believe it creates an elite society. But why wouldn't we want people fighting on a meritocracy basis to get to the top?
Yeah. So you touched on the store there. Let's look at reform. I don't think Nigel is in the building at the moment.
I can't see him.
How do you rate his performance over the last few months?
So Nigel's doing fine. I mean, the only thing
what do they say? What do they say? The acronym is fine. Something insane, neurotic, and emotional. I think it may. Yeah. When someone says they're doing fine, it's something insane, neurotic, and emotional.
I don't know what the F stands for. I don't want to second guess on your podcast.
Go on.
Well, what I would say, however, though, is when I say fine, I mean good. I do mean genuinely good. The £5 million gift is a problem for him optically, but I don't think it's a problem for him legally. I don't think it's put off any of the people that would vote for him. And actually, having been around the Clacton by-election last week, he needed his security. When I first met Nigel Farage, he was stood out the GB News studios smoking a cigarette on his own. I saw him do two things: speak to two different types of people just in 2 minutes. One type of person who walks up and said, "Nigel, love everything you're doing." Another one walked up and read in the riot act. Yeah. He treated them both equally, but they had access to him, and they could do that. You couldn't get that close to Nigel now. When I was close to Nigel in Clacton last week, I didn't even say hello to him. He was surrounded by 6 of the biggest blokes I've ever seen.
Yeah. That's also, I think, an interesting insight into, and again, we give politicians a tough time, and rightly so, and I don't resile from what I previously said, that the quality of people in public life has never been lower. It's tragically, tragically bad. But, again, when you hear those little things, you go, why on earth would you want to be a politician? I was speaking to former Prime Minister of Australia, friend of the show, Tony Abbott, the other day. He was telling me about his second election campaign. He got first elected in 96, and then 98 election, he was handing out how to vote cards at the Manly Surf Lifesaving Club, beach in Sydney. He goes in to went into the dunny to take slash. And he was literally at the urinal, mid-flow, and a bloke comes in and goes, "Oh, F you, Abbott, you fascist, yada, yada, yada." And then Abbott, who hadn't had any sleep for a week because he'd been campaigning, and he was literally in a very vulnerable position.
Yes.
Has just gone, "Oh, F off, mate." And of course, in the Manly Daily the next week, it is Tony Abbott tells local citizen to F off.
Yeah.
And Tony laughs and says, "Yeah, but I've been re-elected by that point anyway, so stuff it."
Good, proper politician, Tony Abbott.
The point is, he's a great man. And again, highly recommend everyone goes and watches the Fire at Will episode with him. But it goes to show you can be a good bloke and kind and courteous to 99 out of 100 people in the public, but this is the one day where you cop a inverted commas, we might have to bleep that. That's the one that you get caught up on. Like, why would anyone want to be a politician?
Look, that can happen, and I don't have any issue with that, by the way, whether they're left, right, or centre. If I want to see humans in politics. I mean, I don't know if you get asked this question a lot, but weirdly, I do get asked if I would like to be not by. I mean, Nigel Farage has never walked up to me and said, "I want you to be my chancellor." Maybe Robert Jenner could have something to say about that if he did. But many people have asked me, and let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. It is much easier to talk about it than it is to do it. And it's much more rewarding to talk about it than it is to do it. It's not like football or Aussie rules or cricket. It was much more fun to play the game, and then it was a second best to go and commentate on it. Actually, in politics these days, there's a lot of pressure. The money, although it's £90,000 a year, is not enough.
No,
Simply not enough.
Compared to, if you look at it, like how many people are in each electorate in this country? What, 250,000? Is it more?
Yeah, in that number, yeah.
Now, if you say, and it's not a perfect analogy, that you are the CEO of a company with 250,000 employees, you are on multiple millions of pounds.
You could well be, yeah.
Yeah. Now, so again, 90,000 compared to the average salary is much higher. But one of my opinions is that I think you should 5x the total salary for politicians, which I know is not a popular one. But if it meant that you would start to at least get some people who would otherwise go into investment banking or entrepreneurialism or, whatever, actual proper businesses, then that can only be a good thing.
Well, absolutely. It's why you get corruption in politics on both sides. It's why your head gets turned by some offer. Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Can I lobby you for this? And if you do that, you take this. You can actually remove that incentive by paying people well. There is a country in the world, and it escapes me now, that did start paying their politicians incredibly well.
So I know that Singapore pays their politicians well, but they've also got an incentive model where they, like a executive, have KPIs for politicians, and your pay is in part dependent on whether you hit your KPIs, which again makes a heck of a lot of sense.
You wouldn't end up with most of the Parliamentary Labour Party under that scheme, because they would fail immediately. I've got 3 or 4 names that come to mind at the moment, but I don't want to say who they are. But you can guess. I mean, you can guess who these people are.
I do. Rachel Reeves, Lammy, pick pretty much all.
Stella Creasy, Samantha Niblett, Amanda Martin.
But again, those names you mentioned are just backbenchers. And fine, you've always had loony backbenchers in politics. But the fact that the great offices of state in this country are now taken up by people who would not be able to be hired for a middle management role in a corporate is staggering. And I stand by that. I don't think it is hyperbole that someone like Rachel Reeves or someone like David Lammy would not be competent enough or talented enough to be a divisional leader in Lloyd's or Barclays or Tesco or wherever. It is extraordinary that you can get to that point in politics at such a limited level of talent.
No, there isn't anybody in that cabinet. And I've worked with some, people that wield power in the corporate world, earn very well. There isn't anyone in that, particularly under Starmer's cabinet, that would have got anywhere near maybe middle management in those companies. But that's why they find their way into politics, and that's the essence of the problem. You're going to get David Lammy if it's easy for him to get into politics and just be, and don't forget the way they get in is appealing to via hook or by crook to people's human nature. And if you can wander around telling people, because you're the same skin colour as me, you must think the same way as I do, you're a similar culture to me, so I will look after you, as if human nature doesn't come into it, as if identitarianism is the be-all and end-all, and people are just gobbling it up, then you can get into politics right now. I say, when people say about politics, and I'm serious about it, I say I could probably connect very well with the average man and woman on the street. I'd have no issue with that whatsoever. But also, at the same time, if you're going to get into politics, you need to be able to deal with the care system, the welfare system, the fact that an old lady's had a recycling bin stolen, all these other things that get involved, all these other things that are almost impossible to fix and get right the whole time. And that's what you're held against or measured against. It's very, very difficult. So, look, anyone who goes into politics, fair play. When they go in for sinister reasons or they go in just because it makes them feel better, that's where I have a massive issue.
Do you have any hope that the current problems that we have around political leadership in this country can get better, or do you think this is just a continuous slow terminal decline?
This is the longest period of decline in my life. It feels like the longest period of decline in several generations. I understand that the 1970s was very bad, which is before my time. And Thatcher came in, was very much disliked, but actually turned a bankrupt country into a very successful financial country in using methods that some people disagree with. But nonetheless, those are the facts. But I think this is the longest period of decline I've seen, and not just what I mean by decline. People can point and say, "Well, the economy is this." There's always these year-on-year comparisons, and as things, the thing about year-on-year comparisons, as everything gets exponentially worse, just going back a year and going, "Well, compared to last year, it's slightly better." Well, that's nonsense. Who cares about that? I want to compare us to, 1985 or 1965 or, 1925, whatever it might be. Look at the best periods. It's like if you're running a sports team. You don't compare it to your relegation season. You compare it to when you got promotion or when you won the cup or whatever it might be. That's what we need to be looking at, success, and not be afraid of success.
The reason I teed you up there for that question is because there is still an essence of what makes this country grow. We spoke about it on your new show the other day, why, and we are in a business where, unfortunately, and I think it is fair, but it is unfortunate, we do look at the negative sides of how this country is being run because, to be perfectly frank, there's more negative than positive at the moment. But there is still an essence of this country which is great. And I'm going to embarrass you slightly, but I'm going to ask you to read a little ode that you put on Instagram, on Twitter the other day,
Okay.
which you said you'd written previously, but you'd never actually published.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I can understand what you think. Yeah, this was something I'd spent probably about a year writing, and I shared it after an England game, feeling particularly patriotic. And I thought, you know what? This is a poem I'd written to England from my perspective, and I've never read it out loud, even to myself. But I will read it now, and I stand by it. To be English, to walk where ancient footpaths wind, through fields that generations lined, beneath old oaks and skies of grey, where history still shapes today. To cheer when hope seems but all but gone, yet carry quietly on and on. To laugh at rain, put kettles on, and greet the day before the dawn. To treasure freedom, earn with cost, remembering those we've loved and lost. To stand for fairness, law, and right, though none of us are always right. To speak with accents rich and broad, from northern mills to southern sod. A thousand stories, all our own, yet bound by something deeply known. To be English is not one face, but many lives, one shared place. Imperfect, proud, bold, both old and new, a land still finding what is true. And that made me, I'm not afraid to say that, it made me slightly emotional reading that, because I'd written that over a period of time where I was trying to find a sense of everything that was going on. And why do I feel the way that I do? Why do I find myself saying the things that I do? What do I love most about being English? What do I love most about being British? And that's what I wrote.
They're beautiful words. They are affecting words. Some people would suggest that is not a reflection of England as it is today, but a nostalgic look at what it once was.
Most certainly.
Yeah, where do you land?
Yeah, it is nostalgia, and it is also a cry for help. It's saying, look, this is where we were. Why can't you see? None of that, by the way, is biased towards a skin colour or biased towards a political view. It's biased towards a culture carved in time, something that I treasure dear, and that I know when people come to this country with good intentions are looking for also. I know from your own words, Will, that you see this as a country you wanted to live and work in, something that you admire. You're an Aussie. You love being an Aussie, but you wanted to come to the UK. You understood what it was to be a Brit, and you wanted to share in that and indulge in that, and that's fantastic. And anyone who wants to do that is largely welcome, as far as I'm concerned. However, it's going. It's almost gone. There will be people watching this that will write in the comments that, as wonderful as that is, Paul's viewing this country through rose-tinted glasses, and that is long gone. Maybe the last time anything like that was seen was in the 60s or something like that. But for me, that's a poem of hope. It's saying to people, look, we are a 1,000-year-old culture. Let's not throw it away.
The challenge for the country is that a poor economic trot, which this country has been in for 20 years, so you probably can't even call it a trot anymore, it can be reversed. Thatcher showed that with the right medicine, you can turn around an economy. Even things like woke, you can say, right, that was wrong, we can move in a different direction, and then you can come out of it stronger eventually. I think the sad thing, which a lot of people are now whispering and increasingly just splat out saying in the pubs across this country,
is you can't reverse demographic change. You can't reverse demographic change in the way that you can change a tax policy. And the demographic change has fundamentally shifted the fabric of this country and the fabric that you speak about so eloquently there. And that's, I think, what worries a lot of people is that, this isn't even a world war, which can have the most seismic impact on a country. You can come out of it stronger. You can't revert. Well, some people suggest you can. I would suggest it's almost impossible to reverse the demographic change that the country has seen and will see over the next 20 years if something drastic isn't done.
Well, in order to achieve that, you've got to have very honest conversations about where the line is. So the line is cultural, and that means resetting, almost to a factory setting. Well, that inevitably means deportations. It means getting rid of people that are welfare tourists that have just come here, migrant immigrants, for instance, that have just come here and they're taking from the public purse and not giving back in. It means getting rid of people that really have no place being here. They're not contributing. They don't understand any of the words I wrote there. They don't know what that means. It's not just words I assembled, in 3 minutes. Those are things that came to me over a long period of time because they meant a lot to me. I love nothing more than walking in the mist of a country path on a spring morning or an autumn morning where the sun is only just coming up and feeling like I am in a place that I belong and that my ancestors belonged in and that people of the future can belong in, that we can protect for them. But you cannot solve the problems of now and create a prosperous future without having honest conversations. And truth itself is very much at risk now. So we are going to have to, at some point, have politicians, a group of politicians, and as a country, a very honest discussion about what we want, because it is failing. If you think anything about now is successful, you are mistaken.
Okay, well, let's have a couple of those honest conversations. Muslim immigration, where do you land on that?
It's too much. So for instance, I've no issue with someone being Muslim. I have a massive issue with people saying that everybody else must live the way that they do. More often than not, when you hear about Islam in this country, it's about the way they view us and the way they're making changes to the way that we live. No, no, and thrice no. If you come here, we are a Christian country. We have a set of values which are different and separate to those of the Muslim faith. You are welcome, but you must assimilate. Your country, where you came from, is likely to have been the place that you fit unless you are willing to assimilate.
So now we get into the whole paradox of tolerance conversation. The more that you tolerate the intolerance, eventually intolerance will reign. So where do you draw lines here? For example, would you ban the niqab, facial covering?
Yes.
Would you ban halal slaughter? And I guess by extension, to be consistent, kosher slaughter?
Yes and yes. I think you have to treat those two things equally. As much as people will argue that the Jewish faith does assimilate to a lot, there are arguments that it doesn't, particularly Orthodox Jewish people. They stick very much in their communities. But what they don't do is impose. They do stick on their own, and they do fund their own, they do look after one another. But you know what? Perhaps we need to learn a little from that. But both indulge in a type of animal cruelty that I don't agree with.
Would you block the construction of mosques in regional English areas?
Absolutely, yes. Because, we should be... We don't have to... Okay, religions, even on the right, is an interesting discussion point. Not everybody wants to have Christian values. Not everybody wants to be religious. Not everyone wants to believe in God or anything above them. Fine. That's not an issue. But putting massive, great mosques all over the country opposes that. Well, churches have been in as part of our country for 1,000 years. And they are a great part of our landscape. They are beautiful, beautiful buildings. I'm not saying that mosques aren't. What I'm saying is... I am actually. Yeah, I'll take all that back, cut that out. No, but what I'm saying is we simply mustn't. It's one step beyond the Rubicon for me. It's not what I want to see, and it's a no.
I think the other thing, and I've been reflecting on this, is the left intentionally conflates the immigration conversation to say that if you're on the right and you have some of the concerns that we've raised, you're against all immigration. It's obviously ridiculous. I'd be a hypocrite if I was. But I quite like the term, which has got some prominence on the online right, which is third world migration. Well, when we're talking about this, we are effectively talking about people from the third world who are more likely to have views which are antithetical to someone who grew up in a Western liberal democracy. This argument comes up a lot on GB News, where you'll have someone be deliberately naive, deliberately misleading, when you will say it is obvious that different cultures, people from different cultural backgrounds commit crimes at different rates. And they will say, well, there's no evidence for that. And in some respects, they're right, because the government refuses to reveal crime data by different...
We don't even know if they've collected it.
Yeah. So in some respects, they're right, which is why I then always say, well, look at this just from a common sense viewpoint. If you come from Afghanistan, for example, a deeply misogynistic culture, which does treat women appallingly, which does have a incredibly patriarchal culture, which does have very different, and I would say, attitudes towards violence in the public sphere. Do you really think that if you come from that culture and have lived there for the first 18 years of your life, jump on a dinghy and then hit a English beach, suddenly that all goes away?
It doesn't go away.
You just straight away put up a poster of Joe Root, you start singing, God Save the King, you put on an episode of Fawlty Towers and everything's hunky-dory. So obviously it's not as simple as that. So when that follows, of course it makes sense that, someone from Afghanistan is going to be 20 to 25 times more likely to commit sexual assault. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work that out, but you'll get this gaslighting from the left, say, oh, no, culture doesn't apply in that instance, despite the fact that they will say that we need to have education campaigns in this country to coach people into particular types of behaviours. It only works one way.
Well, culture is everything in that instance. I don't know whether you deliberately mentioned going to the beach, but it's a very important point. This Brighton and Bournemouth have seen some of the worst rape cases in recent times. And one of the reasons they have, and from the men that they have from places like Eritrea and Sudan and these Islamist countries, is because they are not used to seeing semi-naked women or respecting the fact that women have a choice on how they want to dress and look, particularly when they're at the beach or particularly when the weather's warm and they don't have to cover up, and they're not just objects of sexual meat. If they choose to lay on a beach with very little on, they have every right to do that, and we are brought up in both of our countries to respect that this is they are equal to us, and in many ways, if we're not stupid, slightly more equal than us, because every one of us has got a sister, an aunt, a mother, or whoever it might be that we hold in very high regard, because they were the people that raised us. And we see that in this country. We treat women very, very differently, both culturally and sexually. They are not to be owned. If you enter a relationship with a woman, she must first invite you. There must be consent. You can't just go about it and allow your natural urges to just play out. That's not what we do in our culture, and our culture is part of our country, and it's not what we do here. So if you're going to deny that, that exists, those urges exist, and that culture exists from their perspective, then of course it's going to be prevalent, because no one's having a conversation with them to say, hang on a minute, mate, I don't think so. And by the time it gets to that point, it's anger, it's frustration, it's rage, because they've seen something absolutely abhorrent happen, in a public area or on a beach or whatever it might be. No one's having that conversation with him because everybody's afraid to, because anybody who's in a position to have a conversation with him is told that would be discrimination. So it's discrimination to prevent crime. And I always say, particularly when it comes to law and order, you have to have discrimination. You have to be able to discriminate between a criminal and someone acting innocently. And that is criminal behaviour. It's both culturally criminal and it's both, legally in terms of the policy and process criminal. We have to be able to head it straight on. We have to be able to have honest conversations. The other thing I would pick up on, you talk about these countries. If you go to those countries, a lot of the people that stay in those countries are the best crop of those people, and often will say to you, why on earth have you allowed this? Why on earth have you taken these people in? We don't even want them here. Is it any wonder when France get millions of illegal immigrants flooding in, and then they come to Britain, that they just take the 850 million off the British government and say, off you go, boys, we don't want you here either. What a great deal. If it was going the other way, you and I would secretly be going, nice.
Yep.
See you later.
You have a 16-year-old daughter.
I do.
How does that colour how you think about these types of debates and in the future of England more generally?
It does make a big difference. It really does make a big difference. Look, I allow my daughter to have all of her own views of the world, whatever views, spiritually, religiously, politically. She talks to me about them, and I've seen her as she goes and does A-level art, and the company that she keeps and the ideas that are being shared with her. I've seen her blossom into somebody who is forming their own political views, and sometimes she'll challenge mine. She's, when she was 12, 13, she came to GB News Studios with me, saw me do an episode of Headliners, thought it was absolutely wonderful and wanted to work in TV herself. Cut 3 years later, she's like, oh my God, you're on GB News. I can't tell any of my friends. Now, I don't challenge that. The only thing I've ever said to her, purely from a personal perspective, is you need to make your own mind up. But what you're saying there is, oh, you're with Patrick Crittys. I see him on TikTok. He's bad. I say, well, let me tell you something. Patrick's very, very similar to me. What do you think of me? And yeah, you're a good man, she thinks I'm a good dad, which is fantastic, and I'm very proud of that. I said, well, exactly. We're no different. He doesn't harbour any dangerous views. I said, but have you ever then considered why we have those views? Well, yeah, I guess, And then I said, well, do you want to give that some thought and then ask me some questions? And that's kind of where we are with the conversation. And I'm not going to say to her, you must, you must, you must. In fact, she needs to generate her own identity in this world. I will steer her if I can, and I will do it through persuading her, through, winning over her heart and mind via debate. But I'm not going to tell her that she's ridiculous and stupid and thick, which is exactly what you and I might have been told if we were about to vote Brexit, for instance. However, there is a very dangerous side to just allowing someone to be naive to the world, and that is that they're not aware of the dangers that face them. And unfortunately, because of successive governments, greater dangers face my daughter at 16 than ever faced me when I was at 16, or the girls that were my friends or partners that faced them when they were 16. It is more dangerous for them now. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't groups within their peers that were born in this country, raised in this country, that don't cause that same threat. But we understand that threat. That's incumbent, and we are still trying to tackle it. You're never going to get rid of it. But when you have a culture come in that is the way that it is, and we also have an authority that wants us to deny it, well, then you have a recipe for disaster. So I see it as a job to do, to try and win over people's hearts and minds, maybe get what would be considered a right-wing government into place to help my daughter and her generation be safer in this country in the future.
That's a job you're doing remarkably well, Paul Cox. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Will. Cheers.
Thank you.